Please be advised that the following video contains discussion of some topics which some viewers may find distressing. In July 2007, Chantelle McDougall, her partner Simon Kadwell, their daughter Leela, and friend Tony Popic left their home in Nannup, Western Australia. They told their families they were moving to Brazil to do charity work and spread alleged spiritual guru Simon's beliefs. None of them have been seen in over 15 years. Chantelle and Simon first met at a spiritual seminar in the late 1990s. Simon was 32, had a son, and was in a relationship, and Chantelle was in her late teens. After moving in with them and working as their nanny, Chantelle developed a bond with Simon that was far from a conventional romantic relationship. Their pairing was described as one not based on love, but had Simon's spirituality as its focus. Simon's beliefs drew on mainstream religions such as Christianity and Buddhism, views with more unusual ideas such as aliens, other dimensions, and humanity originating from outer space. According to Simon, people on this plane of existence can ascend to another higher plane by relinquishing physical goods and individual wants. These ascendants avoid the incoming Armageddon, and those left behind are condemned to suffer endlessly. And in some accounts of Simon's beliefs, it's thought this ascension process was initiated with one's own death. Simon spread his message through multiple books alongside online forums and chat groups, whose donations and book purchases were one of his only sources of income. After leaving his birthplace in England to commence his spiritual journey, he held no formal employment in Australia. The only other money he received came after a custody case saw him granted visitation rights to his son, and later permanent residency in Australia. In 2001, Chantelle gave birth to a daughter named Leela, and though Simon was Leela's biological father, Chantelle chose not to have his name recorded on Leela's birth certificate. By 2003, Chantelle, Simon and Leela had moved to a beef farm in Nannup, Western Australia, where they were eventually joined by Tony Popic, another devotee of Simon's who had previously lived with them. Chantelle and Tony both worked odd jobs and endeared themselves to the Nannup community, but Simon spent most of his time alone on his computer, communicating with his followers online. On the few occasions he did appear on the streets of Nannup, his behaviour perplexed and alarmed locals. Despite the seclusion Nannup offered, Simon didn't escape scrutiny completely. In 2004, Chantelle's ex-boyfriend travelled to Nannup and tried to tell her that Simon wasn't who he said he was. Simon was actually Gary Felton. He'd stolen someone else's identity and was running a cult. Before her ex could tell her everything, Chantelle called the police and had a restraining order placed against him. Police did investigate her ex's claims, but found nothing about Simon that suggested any ill intent, and they took no action against him. They would later admit that Chantelle's ex was right though, and they'd arrested the wrong man. By April 2007, things started to change for the group, and especially Simon. He began complaining about electromagnetic fields emitted by a newly installed transformer on the property and told the electrician it was making him sick. Simon said he was considering moving to Brazil to get away from it with his family, but while the transformer had been installed, it hadn't actually been activated. The following May, Simon told one of his online followers about his EMF troubles and the constant pain he lived in. His solution was to take his own life and have the others in the house do likewise. But after one of his followers told him that killing Leela would be murder, Simon stopped discussing these plans. Simon would once again come under police notice after being caught speeding, and police used this opportunity to ask Simon about his time in England. Though Simon cooperated with the traffic stop, it was clear that questions about his life before Australia made him nervous. Simon's unease continued when a package supposedly containing Leela's passport arrived at their house. He snatched the package up and took it into his room after Chantelle's visiting mother asked if they were going on a trip. Chantelle told her mother in a phone call weeks later that they were travelling to Brazil to do charity work By this point, Simon had apparently already left, and Chantelle and the others would soon follow. By the 16th of July, the whole group had left Nannup. In a note stuck on the house's front door, Chantelle told their landlords they'd gone to Brazil to escape the EMFs emitted by the transformer on their property, while Tony left a similar note in his caravan. Both house and caravan had been thoroughly cleaned and emptied of personal items, although all of their furniture was left behind. The Brazil story seems to have been just a ruse though, and they may have never even left Australia. After being reported missing by their family members, the investigation into the group's disappearance revealed some unusual behaviour. Whatever the true nature of the group's departure, it was clear that they'd made some effort to get their affairs in order. All their bills were paid, their phone line disconnected, and Chantelle sold their dogs and gave away the house's chickens. The woman who bought the dogs would later describe Chantelle as acting anxious and wanting to hurry her out of the house. Chantelle also told the woman that Leela was sick and may need to go to a hospital, but later said in a phone call that the hospital trip wasn't necessary. As well as this, Tony sent his brother his superannuation and bank account details and gave him power of attorney, and in an accompanying note, Tony said he was sorry for being a crappy brother. When the group was first reported missing, police didn't search their house. They believed there was nothing to suggest a crime had occurred. Though the home was searched several months later, a proper forensic examination wasn't possible as new tenants were living on the property. Before their disappearance, the group's house phone was used by somebody calling themselves J. Roberts to buy multiple bus and train tickets to various destinations across Western Australia, but only some of these tickets were used. We're not sure who travelled on these tickets, although it's thought it was Simon or Tony, or possibly both of them on different journeys. Tony's phone was also used to make several calls, including for a pizza delivery on the 15th of July to somebody matching his description. Tony's driver's license was also used as ID to book a room for 2 people at a hostel in Northbridge. Outside of their last phone calls, there have been several unconfirmed sightings of the group since their disappearance, and 2 of these may have had supporting security footage that was not followed up on by police. And in February 2011, a man checked into the Emu Point Caravan Park under the name Gary Felton. Police interviewed everyone else in Australia that shared the same name, and they were all ruled out as the man who checked in. Despite the work done by police, government agencies in Australia and abroad, and the search efforts of Chantelle and Tony's families, no trace of the group has been uncovered. An inquest into their disappearance was held in 2017 and found that evidence couldn't conclusively prove whether Chantelle, Leela, Tony or Simon were dead or alive, but the inquest did suggest some theories about what may have happened to them. There's a lot to suggest that the Brazil story was an attempt at a misdirection, and Simon may have followed through with his plans to take his own life and convince the others to follow his lead. Simon had told a previous partner about an unsuccessful attempt to take his own life and told others that he was taking antipsychotic drugs. Simon's online activity ceased in July 2007, right when the group vanished, and there's also been no activity in Chantelle or Tony's bank accounts. And though Simon was against Chantelle maintaining contact with her parents, she continued to defy this wish throughout their relationship. Chantelle's parents haven't heard from their daughter since July 2007, which could signify that she and the rest of the group are no longer alive. Former partners and cult members have also recounted how Simon was manipulative of those around him, discouraging people from speaking with family or dwelling on their past selves. And if he wanted the others in his household to take their own lives as an extension of their beliefs, he may have persuaded them to do so. While we can only speculate on whether this occurred, others are known to have done so after visiting Simon. There's also a chance that Simon may still be alive and the rest of the group is dead. He was known to have assumed new identities and started over before. It's just what he did before he came to Australia. Simon was indeed born Gary Felton and stole the identity of Simon Kadwell from a colleague while he was still living in England in the mid-1980s. Simon could have adopted another new identity after the deaths of the others, perhaps using some of the money Chantelle and Tony withdrew before disappearing. The possibility of them all being alive in hiding somewhere in Australia can't be dismissed either. The increased scrutiny of Simon's past and fear of EMF waves may have led them to stage their disappearance. Some of Simon's former followers and acquaintances argue that he did not encourage anyone to take their own lives as part of the ascension process. There's no doubt that Simon exerted considerable influence over Tony and Chantelle, who both showed signs of being amenable to coercion. It may have reached a point where he convinced them not to take their own lives, but to go into isolation and cut all contact with their families. If any of them are still alive, Chantelle would be 42, Leela would be 22, Tony would be 55, and Simon, aka Gary, would be 60 as of this video upload. Please contact Crime Stoppers or your local area's equivalent organisation if you have any information on any of their whereabouts.